I'm going to show some of the how he talks about escaping the man box. But what is the source? What's in what are they sourcing? So if you look at this screen here, you'll see that from the book Devon Franklin just uses the words. He sources Tony Porter when he talks about the man box. And essentially what this is a toolbox of behaviors and values that men access to guide their steps on how to be men, right? And these are the things that they're taught. You have to be strong. You have to be aggressive. You must be successful at all costs. You must be certain. There can be no doubt. If you're lost, damn it, don't ask for directions. Just go through until you can get through. Stoicism. We don't show emotions. Why? We talked about that. Because if you show emotions as a lamb, and once you're in the pack of wolves, then that could be detrimental. Powerful, superior to women, moneymakers, violent, tough, angry, take charge. So these are the values and the behaviors that are inside this man box that most men are given as a gift, understanding of how to be a man. And women are also given this box on how to interact with men. So we have this dynamic where people are out there with this radicalized understanding of manhood, and they're operating with one another. And what's happening is the result of that is the toxicity that we see that Gillette talked about. We see emerging broken and frayed relationships, underdeveloped relationships, man to woman, man to man. Men, if all the men in this session right now, if you really think about, and there's probably some exceptions here, but if you think about when you gather with your friends, do you talk about, honestly, a lot of if they're going through troubles in their relationships, do they really come and express how that makes them feel, other than I'm angry right now, or I'm upset because she ain't doing what I know is right? Do they talk about the pain that's inside of them because of how they had, how they want a good relationship is not happening? Do the men in your life who have children come and talk about how their child now is of a certain age, going into teenage years, and is no longer responding to them like they're Superman? It's like, I don't like you, Dad, or whatever you say, I'm not trying to hear. That hurts a father. And if you don't have the avenues to talk about that, you're just pushing those emotions down, as you have been taught to do as men. So the man box. So we, as I've been trying to do in my writings and my conversation with men, trying to get them to recognize that this exists. This is not something that they don't encounter, because by the very nature of being a man in this society, you encounter these behaviors within yourselves and within your friends. And you have to be cognizant of these behaviors and values in order to come out of it. Do we have any questions so far? Any reactions? Either I'm presenting such a brilliant presentation.
No, I had something, Mark.
Go ahead.
I think that's true, because you were asking, like, you have men that you talk to, and so I have both sets of men, so I know who I can take stuff to, and I'm going to get positive feedback, and I'll get the support that I need. Then there's another group where I know I just can't even touch it with them because they're going to fall right into what the man box says that they're going to do. You know what I mean? Make fun or whatever, or not take it seriously. And so I definitely know who I can take what I need to take to who's appropriate and who's not appropriate, who's safe, who's not safe for me to do that.
And I think, Marcus, thank you for that. I think that is, as we, those of us who are emerging from this thinking, I love to give the comparison of this thing called the allegory of the cave by Plato. And he talks about these group of people who are bound in this cave, and they're chained to one another. And behind them are, we don't know, but what we see in front of them are images cast before them. And these people being bound and chained, those images become their reality. And year after year, that's what they see, that's what they interact with, that's how they respond, that's how they order their day. So everything is based upon those images. So to me, those images represent the things inside the man box. Well, what happened was, in this story, someone climbed up out of the cave and went to the surface, and they saw there was a completely new way of living, a complete way of freedom, of thinking, of behaviors that was such a breathtaking moment, such a moment of just freedom, that they can breathe in and not have to just be bound to these few images. And that person went back down and he started to tell people, hey, look, this is not reality. This is a false understanding of reality. This understanding of manhood and masculinity that we have, it's false. So let's go to the surface. Well, when they talked about that, some went. Marcus, men like you and David, they went to the surface. They took that chance. And it is a chance because it's scary. And we're going to talk about, why I say that in a couple of seconds. But it is a scary thing to go outside of your comfort zone, to take a chance to go outside of what you believe, because the bottom line is, if you're giving up something, what are you receiving? If you are going to go into a new understanding of manhood, what does that look like? And for most people, change is a scary thing. And most people don't invite change into their life that easy. And if they did, this world that we have, it wouldn't look like this. So a lot of people resist it, Marcus. And so when you speak of that group of friends who you can't go to, that's the majority who just, they don't, it's not that they don't want to believe, it's just that something in them prevents them from fully opening up to the idea that there could be a better way. And so we come to this dynamic here where we have these two camps, right? But before I jump into that, I just want to get maybe one or two instances where people see some of these traits playing out in their life directly or indirectly. So maybe just one or two comments. And I don't want to hear from David because I know he's enlightened. Marcus, you as well. So anyone else, I want to hear where they saw these traits, where we go back to the man box, where some of these traits unfolded in their life, where men in their life acted this way to the point where it became uncomfortable to be around them, or it became uncomfortable just to live in that atmosphere, or you saw it was unproductive for them. Any instances that we can share? I'll give one. My grandfather and my father, they had a rocky relationship the entire time of their relationship. My father took me and my brother and he moved us from New York from St. Louis to New York. And it was really against the will of my mother, but she capitulated and let it happen, and truly against the desire of my grandfather. So he severed his self from my father completely. He didn't talk about how that pain hurt him. He just severed his self from my father. He wouldn't take my father's letters. He wouldn't talk to my father. And the way I found this out is that, because my father didn't tell me any of this. When my father passed, I went to clean up his things and I found these letters that he wrote his father. And he was really just the pain that he had inside of him, the hurt and the pain. I thought that relationship didn't really matter that much to him, right? I'm thinking that my father is, he's going about his life. His relationship or lack of relationship with his grandfather didn't bother him. But I realized it did. And I realized how he interacted with me was a result of him not having a relationship with his father. And that was based on these two men not really expressing how they felt. My grandfather was hurt, so he expressed his hurt through severing the relationship. My father was hurt, and so what he did was he just became a very sort of dogmatic work, study, and this is how you get ahead in life. You don't really express emotions. This is, you move ahead. And so I got that understanding of manhood. And so I had to come out of that radicalization, that understanding of manhood, and that took a lot. And that was a journey for me that really began when my daughter again was born. I had to really look at how I treated women and the dynamic. I had to look at how I was as a man and say that I did not want to be that way as a father. So that's an example for me. Does anyone else have any examples? Okay, David and Marcus, you're in if you want to jump in. All right.
I have a quick story, Mark. I remember being in 8th grade. I had a kind of a similar haircut to what I'm rocking right now. I was basketball, and I went for a layup, and there was this guy. He kind of had some his teeth weren't the sharpest, or they weren't the straightest. Anyway, so I went up for a layup, and he kind of bit me. I have it right here, as a matter of fact. He bit me here on my head, so I started bleeding. And so my coach, who I went to, I fell on the ground. My coach, he said, "Hey, Brian, walk it off. You'll be okay. Walk it off." Right? And I'm hurting. I'm bleeding. And yet the man that I look to, hey, coach, what do? He tells me to walk it off. So here I am bleeding on an 8th grade practice gym, walking around the whole gym, and yet I'm bleeding. And it wasn't until like one of the girls' coaches saw me and say, "Are you okay? Come here." And he kind of took me, and I got taken care of. And so for him, man, in that moment, at being 13 years old, he walk it off. Doesn't seem if I'm okay, but just walk it off. You'll be all right. You know, I push the pain down, even though he saw me bleeding. And so that was something that I think that's a part of that man box that you're saying we're supposed to be tough. Don't show hurt. If you're hurting, pretend like you're not. And that was spoke very vividly to me then, as well as it does now.
Thank you, David. And I think you know that's really, you know, I think that's really that's a common story that men and boys experience. We are given very limited opportunities to express our emotionalities, right? Because we have been told that the expression of that means that you are not a man, right? And so we have been taught to divert from those emotions. So when we get into relationships and we are called upon to express ourselves in moments where there's strife in the relationship, it's not that most men, it's not that they don't want to do that. They just are, they don't have the material to do it. They don't have the practice of doing it. And more, they have been told if you do it, that means something. Women, by and large, if you talk to women, they say, well, what are some of the things that's most important to you? And kind of on the list, is high on the list is security. And some women who still labor under this same sort of radicalized thinking, if they see their man in a tough situation crying, there's a reaction there. It's not that the love is gone, but am I secure with this man now? Right? So men, they understand that, so they shy away. So with this conversation is not a conversation that has to happen only in circles of men. This is a conversation that has to expand throughout the community if we want to have a change, if we want to see a de-radicalization of masculinity. This is a conversation that has to happen across the board. So if we talk about de-radicalizing masculinity, you see that. What is de-radicalized masculinity? It's transformational, it's inspirational, it's accountable, it's compassionate, it's equitable leadership. All of these traits. It doesn't mean, because someone said, Mark, if I de-radicalize my masculinity, does that mean that I won't be able to protect my family? No. Does that mean I won't be able to provide for my family? No, it doesn't mean that. If someone breaks through your door and they mean harm to your family, yes, then that is a time for violence. That's not a time to go up and try to hug that person. That's a time to act first, and then if there's a conversation that can happen, let it happen. But when you're in a conversation with your wife, your girlfriend, or your significant other, and things are getting heated, that's not a time for violence. That's not a time to recoil into not expressing yourself. That is the opposite of what should be happening. If you are in the workplace and you see only men getting promoted, you can't have that. Well, we're men, we're entitled to that. You have to think in an equitable sort of way. Then this is not right, and speak up about it. You have to begin to create environments where de-radicalization can occur. Any thoughts on that? Any questions? Okay, let's keep it moving. What I'm finding, the barriers to de-radicalizing masculinity, there's two camps, and I touched on that before. There's two camps that have emerged after that Gillette commercial. And the two camps are, one, David and Marcus. I'll call that the camp of understanding that men should be able to express the full kaleidoscope of their emotionality. They should be able to feel unbridled when it comes to being who they are as human beings, right? To expand the definition, to step up out of the box. Then there's the camp that says, well, if that happens, then we're sending lambs to slaughter. And they're very forceful about that. When conversations about gender come up, they're very forceful about putting those conversations down. When conversations about how to raise your daughters and sons in different ways, in a de-radicalized way, they're very forceful about that. But you see different conversations about Little Nas X and how I've seen the responses. Bozy responded to it, and some other rappers responded, and you see that you know, what Bozy, actually not Bozy, but Little Baby, he didn't respond to Little Nas X, but he responded to, you know, his conversation, you know, about his understanding of men and women and gender. That got him in trouble, right? And so I would put him in this camp over here. Now, here's the thing, that where I come in into the conversation, I say, look, and men have been saturated with this understanding of masculinity. That is a part of their thinking. They are bound to that, and that thinking is still being reinforced. So when you take a man and you put him in a canceled sort of prison, like, well, you're canceled. You put him in that prison. He may change his behavior because of fear. He may be able to articulate the things that he needs to articulate, not to get put into canceled prison or Me Too prison. But that doesn't mean that he's changing. That doesn't mean his behavior is changing. It just means that he can articulate the things that he needs to say, but he has not began to actualize. His behavior has not moved towards changing. And so I say to that when we talk about how do we move past, how do we move into this de-radicalized environment? One, we have to do what Bell Hooks said. When we look at this Goliath problem, we can't think that one stone like David is going to knock it out. We have to have meetings like this. We have to form circles of meetings where men are allowed to come in and have these conversations. We have to allow the opportunity for change, but it can't be the way that it is in prison, right? You can't put them in prison and not give them resources, and then let them back out of prison and then expect change to happen. We can't operate on that penal system model, because it doesn't work. We have to allow men and encourage men to read books. I have put a new set of things in my man box. I have books by with Dr. Frank Pittman, Bell Hooks, Mark Green. I just did a show with Mark Green the other day on masculinity. Devon Franklin, brother Jason Wilson, Cry Like a Man. There's so many resources out there that men can go. So while we're incubating in these small groups like this, or the barbershop, or man to man, while we're in these groups, if you see that there's change happening, if you see the man is trying to change and he slips up, he goes into the radicalized drug den, and he gets a little bit more radicalized for the moment. He comes out and does some radicalized crap. You can't cancel that person. If you see that person trying, you have to give leeway. You have to give the opportunity for that person to change. But I will add this: while you are in the process of changing, while you're in the process of finding a new way to express your masculinity, while you're finding a new source material for your masculinity, do no harm. Do no harm. If a conversation hits your senses and it rubs against your radicalized thinking, things that you have been told years and it's still being reinforced, struggle to do no harm. Don't get on, if you see Little Nas on that video Don't get on the blog and write a blog. This is what's happened. Our Black men are being taken over and this, and down with homosexuality. Go into a space where you can talk about that. Change is happening. Change is happening. And it's not as scary as a lot of men think. It's scary only because we have been given and just reinforced this understanding of manhood. So much so that now that we see other people being able to express who they are, I liken it to this. Masculinity, I liken to the civil rights movement. When white people saw Black people emerging into their communities, there was a fear. What does this mean for us? What does this mean for white people? That is still the fear that exists right now. If they come into this community, whiteness, the last bastion of whiteness here in America, the greatness, what does that mean? What happens to white people? Nothing happens. You are able to grow and expand. You're able to not have to spend your creativity policing people, trying to stop them from doing what they do, because you now have been given them the expression of growth. People on the Me Too side of life, people on the cancer, that takes energy. That takes energy to watch people, to make sure they're not doing anything. I'm not saying that should stop, right? If you see bad, if you see wrong, you see things that are not constructive, you must speak to it. However, if you also see that someone is trying to change, you cannot be so quick to jump on the bandwagon of canceling that person. If you see a pattern of the person trying to evolve, because that takes time. And none of us on here came to where we are in our thinking overnight. It's just that, David, where you are right now, it was not an overnight process. Marcus, where you are, Joshua, wherever we are, wherever we are in this phase in our life, Mike, Jenna, Lynette, Tanya, Deval, wherever we are, we didn't get there overnight. It was a process. And so it's going to be a process to come out of the man box. It's a process. That's why I like de-radicalization more than toxic masculinity, because de-radicalization is a process. It's a process of change. And when you are in the midst of change, while you are walking the road to change, you will fall. You will stumble. You will make mistakes. But if the goal in front of you is de-radicalization, to see a new way of understanding, to have a new perspective on masculinity, then you will get back up. And then you will be able to dust yourself off and continue. But when you see that person dusting himself off and getting back on that road, don't cancel him. Don't say, well, you know what? He said something that was chauvinist, or he said something, or he did something. No, talk to him. See why he did it. And most likely he's going to tell you, as I struggle with things. I'll be honest with you. I struggle sometimes with the conversation of the transgender community. I struggle with that sometimes, right? Because it's been so rooted in my mind about what a man is and what a woman is. And so when that conversation comes up, I participate to the point that I can, and then I try to back away and listen. I'm not always successful with that. I stumble, I say silly things. My stepdaughter catches me and she says, hey, and I got to catch myself with that, right? Because I am recognizing that I may never fully evolve from that thinking. I may never fully evolve from that because it may be so encoded into my DNA of thinking that it may be there. But my goal is to do no harm in that struggle. We have any questions, any comments, any disagreements? Anybody like, man, I'm gonna go out and eat me a steak and continue being the man that I am, and damn what you said.
I have I guess a question and also a comment. One, just in I love the point where you talked about how just as you were closing, you're just speaking how you are still challenged by your stepdaughter just in thinking, and that points to everything you've been talking about about the process, right, of radicalized, and about the process of changing and dealing with some things that we were taught. My question to you, and I think I got it, but you spoke, your viewpoint, I believe, is de-radicalization versus masculinity. Now, my question is that, because you mentioned as a de-radicalization being a new perspective of masculinity. So kind of what you're wanting to see versus toxic masculinity, or is that two different terms you're dealing with? Does that make sense?
For me, it's two different terms. For me, the radicalization of masculinity is the cause of toxic masculinity, right? So if you go to a doctor and there's some internal bleeding, that the internal bleeding in of itself is a problem, but it's not the source of the problem. The source of the problem may be a ruptured vein or something of that. It may be that you've been taking too many medication that thins your blood. So that is, for me, that's the cause, that's the symptom, and radicalization is the cause of it. And I'll tell you how I came to that term. When I was thinking about really the election starting from like 2004 to now, there was a radicalization of political thought, right? There's always been division in this country. But what happened was, because of the advent of social media, the interference with social media and outside foreign influences, and people just getting nestled into these silos that they're in, and their thoughts just reverberating around this narrow thing, and then conspiracy theories sort of rise up, the thoughts that they had prior got radicalized, right? So now there's a hyper sort of approach to race relationships. That's which we knew, we saw it was there. Black people, we experienced that, right? But we see a much more virulent, much more ready to explode cultural race sort of moment that we're in right now. And so when I thought about masculinity, I said, look, I think that's, for me, that's kind of what happened. You had this understanding of this when men came into existence, and I don't know, I can't pinpoint where it happened, but I can say over the years that men have been reinforced with that thinking. They have been rewarded with that thinking. They have been taught that even when things are not going their way, they're still told to still double down on this understanding of masculinity. So to your point, David, there are two different things. Radicalized masculinity is the cause of toxic masculinity. And for me, it opens up a conversation. I have not had anyone who would not engage with me and get into a battle over that term. When I use the term toxic masculinity, I'm stuck. I have to explain what I mean. I have to justify that, no, I'm not saying masculinity is not toxic, that all of it's not, and it just takes too much energy.
I think at some point, because Josh and we had this conversation, someone was like, well, we need someone to talk about toxic masculinity. I'm like, I refuse to have that conversation anymore, because it's so polarizing, and so we recognize that there are definitely things that are wrong about behaviors that come with being a man that may not be the best, but there are also those great qualities, right? So how do we have that conversation without throwing the baby out with the bathwater? You know what I mean? So it's like, exactly. Yes, there are things happening. So there's a very real reason why people are pushing hard against the negative things that we see from masculinity, right? So there's a reason for that. So let's understand what that reason is, and then come together and figure out how we can fix it. But at some point, I'm just like, I get tired of hearing the word toxic masculinity, because it really is just some buzzword that everybody just wants to jump on and not have a real conversation about.
Yeah, and thank you, Marcus. And I think that if we're going to have change, real meaningful change, not just an articulation of what should happen, but if we're going to have an actualized moment of behavioral change, it has to come with openness. It has to come with understanding. We have to. So I'll close with this: if you see men working, if you see men doing the work, give them the opportunity, right? Because the journey to get there. Tanya just spoke of a journey. It's not a straight line. I agree with you, Tanya. It's not a straight line. There's bumps. There's along the way you're going to fall down, right? So we have to be given the opportunity to change, and men have to be sincere about it. we can't just say, well, I'm changing. Okay, well, how are you doing that? What's your sources? I mean, where are you going to get this change? Are you in a men's group, or are you reading? Show me some of the books you're reading. I want to read these books too, because it can't just be an articulation of I want to change, because there's so much that's in the atmosphere, that's still out there in the community, that's telling you to be radicalized. And if you don't get up every day and do something to de-radicalize, to put your mindset in that. If you're in a group of men and they're talking in such a way that demeans women, or that lessens the humanity of another man, if you don't speak to that, if you don't find a way to love them but separate yourself, then you are still perpetuating radicalized masculinity. And the only way we're going to get to a state of de-radicalized masculinity, where it's really everyone is benefiting from it, is that we all have to join into this process, and then realize that it is a process. It's not an overnight journey. Any closing thoughts from anyone? I love to hear. I'm gonna be like a teacher. I'm gonna call on somebody. Tanya, you put something in the comments. Do you have anything that you want to say to us? Going once, going twice. Oh, there she is.
There I go. I'm not going to show my camera.
That's okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tanya.
I am just really, feeling the aspect of the toxic masculinity. But I do have a question for you. Mm-hmm. So how is it, and I may have missed it, so I apologize. How is it that we as women feed into toxic masculinity?
Well, I think if you look at the source of where everyone gets their understanding of manhood, we've all sourced that from that same. We've all been in that pool of understanding. So that man box, men really operate within that box, but women, their understanding of manhood is that, right? They may know that that's not how you operate, but they also know that this is how men operate. And so either when they're in relationships, either they try to work around these traits, they try to manipulate, or they leave these traits, or they just leave, right? And so, but women who are raising their boys, single women, I often hear the conversation where you're the man of the house now, right? Well, what does that even mean to a 10-year-old? I mean, how am I to become a man at 10? So my source for that is going to be the schoolyard. It's going to be television. It's going to be, perhaps if I have a relative who is a man, hopefully that person is de-radicalized or in the process of. So we all are drawing from the same source. So we have to bust up that man box, and we have to put new tools in there that when we look at what manhood is, when we look at our understanding of manhood, those things that is currently in the box of manhood, that no longer exists, or if it exists within reason, right? So like I said, violence is necessary sometimes. When someone busts through your door, yes, you have to defend your family. If you're in a discussion with your wife or your girlfriend and she says something you don't like, violence is not it's not an opportunity, it's not a chance, and you should not access that side of yourself at that moment. So that's how, Tom, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to remind everybody, thank you, Mr. Mark. I want to remind everyone we've got a survey in the chat. So please avail yourself to that survey so Mark can hear what you think about them after you guys get done talking.
Be nice. Yeah. I'm not completely de-radicalized yet. I make it angry.
he said, don't nobody want to tell him while he's on the camera what you think about him. But go ahead, they're gonna write it in that survey. They're gonna write that survey. So make sure everyone accesses and takes full advantage of the survey. In the Hoover app, you can still access Mark directly, so you can send messages to him, blow him up, give him all kinds of questions. I'm talking about tough, difficult questions about all kinds of anything. The hardest question you can think of masculinity, give it to him. See what he's got. And I want to thank everyone for coming out. We are right at 11:30. So we'll be transitioning to the next session shortly. Mark, you got 15 seconds worth of closing thoughts for us?
I just to stay on the journey. It's sometimes it's not easy, And it seems like you're walking along, but you're not. There's a growing movement of men and women who are trying to change the world, trying to de-radicalize. Just find those spaces, get at them, and just continue doing the work.
Well, there you have it, guys. We appreciate y'all showing up. You can stay tuned. We got another session coming up, or you can transition over to the next one. But I